for you, which is exactly what the crowds that were following Jesus wanted, which is exactly what Jesus rebuked. That way of doing things may build a crowd in America, but that's not the kingdom. It's not. That's religion at its best. That's nationalism at its best, but that's not the kingdom. It may get very, very big, and it may build a lot of enthusiasm, and it may even do some good. It's not all bad, but it's not the kingdom. It may look very successful by the world's standards. It may get you a lot of applause and cover on religious magazines because you got the biggest crowd, but it's not the kingdom. Getting people in, as many as possible, and keeping them, if they just sign on the dotted line at the minimal level without any cost, that's not the kingdom. And according to Jesus, the only thing that matters is the kingdom, and the kingdom is about doing God's will, about being faithful to God's will, about carrying the cross in service to others. It's about giving up all for the cause of Christ. It's about having a singular, absolute allegiance that dwarfs in significance all of our other allegiances. It's about looking like Jesus because Jesus embodied the kingdom. He was the perfect manifestation of the kingdom. He was the incarnation of the kingdom. He was the walking, talking version of God's will being done on earth as it is in heaven. So to be in the kingdom is to look like Jesus, to follow Jesus. It's to have one allegiance like Jesus did. It's to give up all like Jesus did. It's to carry the cross like Jesus did. It's to love others like Jesus did. It's to serve others like Jesus did. It's to care about the poor like Jesus did, and to welcome the outcast like Jesus did, and to liberate the oppressed like Jesus did, and to bring wholeness to those who are ill like Jesus did, and to love those who are judged by religion like Jesus did. That's the kingdom. That's the saltiness. That's the only criteria of success. Whether it's big or small matters nothing. Whether it's popular or makes people revile you matters nothing. The only thing that matters is looking like Jesus, carrying out God's will on earth as it is in heaven. Now, there is, in all fairness, I should say, a way to get around this. And maybe some are interested in that. There's a nice exception clause we could throw in here. It's a very, very, very clever, and it's very, very popular. It goes something like this. Well, see, what Jesus meant, here's what he meant. He meant that if you're going to follow Jesus, you have to be willing to give up everything if he asks you. And you have to be willing to carry the cross if you're in a situation that's so unfortunate where you actually have to do that. And you have to be willing to make God your only allegiance if you're in a situation where that's required of you. You have to be willing to give it all up. But it doesn't mean you have to actually give it all up. And fortunately, we're in nice circumstances where we never have to give it all up. We don't have to give up anything. Woohoo! But we would be willing to if he asked us. We're willing to. I love it. So many are willing to die for him, but living for him is kind of the more difficult thing, isn't it? Yeah, this is a nice exception clause. We have to be willing to. And back in the first century, those poor folks living in their culture, they had to, and the early Christians, they had to give up everything. They fed the lions and all that stuff. And throughout history, people in China, even now, Christians, they have to give up everything. But fortunately, we're in a quasi-Christian nation where we don't have to give up anything. But we'd be willing to. Fortunately, we don't have to. And so we go on with our lives that look pretty much like the pagan lives all around us. But we'd be willing to. Now, listen, that's very, very clever. Points given for cleverness. But as a matter of fact, it doesn't fly. In fact, it's utterly impossible. Jesus doesn't say, if you're going to follow me, you must be willing to carry the cross if you have to, but pray that you don't. No, he says, you must carry your cross. It's not rocket science. It doesn't say if you're going to follow me, you must be willing to give up everything, but pray that you don't have to. No, he says you have to give up everything. In fact, the whole New Testament emphasizes over and over and over again that the model, Jesus is the model for how we're to live. What it means to follow Jesus is that. That's the saltiness of the salt. If you don't have that saltiness, the salt is worthless. If you're not actually following Jesus, well, then saying you're following Jesus is worthless. It just has no meaning whatsoever. Jesus' life is held up as the model. Jesus' death is held up as the model for all followers of Jesus to imitate at all times, in all places, in all cultures, no ifs, ands, or buts. John says, whoever says they live in him must live like him. That's what it means to live in him. Whoever, not just first century Christians, not just Christians in persecuted countries, all of us are called to surrender all to the kingdom, to carry a cross, to live a crucified lifestyle. This is the call on our life. Sorry, but this is what we sign up for. Oh, let's go back to the question. How does that heavy, austere, all-or-nothing teaching square with the nice sermon we had last week? I can just imagine somebody, I'm sure, was here for the first time last week, and they loved it. Oh, grace, God's love, I just love it. They come back this week, and not so much. You know, it's like, can we have last week's message over again? That one was kind of nice. And how do we resolve this tension? How do we put these two things together? Come unto me, my yoke is easy. Carry your cross, it's very heavy. How do you put those two things together? I want to give you a paradigm here that I think is the only way to bring these two things together, and it is the saltiness of the salt. Everything hangs on this. It's a paradigm. It's so important that we have ears to hear. Otherwise, this is not going to land. Holy Spirit, be working as I share this. I'll give you two pictures here. Picture number one is what I call life in the flesh. Life in the flesh. The flesh is simply the biblical term for living as though Christ were not Lord. It's the normal secular way of doing life. Of course, you can have all sorts of beliefs about Jesus and God and the Bible, but you live. How you actually live is as though Christ were not Lord. Maybe an hour or two a week, Christ is Lord. You're thinking about it, but otherwise, your life is kind of a functional atheist life. Life in the flesh is life lived according to what Paul calls the pattern of this world. It's how most people live. In fact, it's the natural way of living in this fallen world. And in this flesh paradigm, you are the center of your life. You're the CEO of your life. You call all the shots. And so we all have a number of different aspects of our life, different obligations in our life, things that call for us to be aligned with. So here's me, and I'm the CEO of my life, and I have to somehow divide my time and energy and thought and affection between the various segments of my life. I give a certain slice of the pie to my family, another slice of the pie to my job, another slice of the pie to my small group, another slice of the pie to my civic activity, if you feel like you have some civic duties. You have another slice of the pie, hopefully, to your devotional life, your prayer life, reading the Bible, things like that. Of course, we all need a slice of our pie that is our leisure time, and another slice of the pie goes to church. And we try to juggle all of that, torn in different ways. But the main thing to notice here is that we call the shots. It's our pie, it's our life, and we just try to meet the various obligations as they arise. And see, if this is your paradigm, and you're the center of your pie, then your life is about you. Everything is ultimately about you. So when you hear the gospel, you hear it as about you. So the purpose of Jesus, if you're living with this paradigm, whatever else you may say you believe, what will actually happen is that you're going to try to fit Jesus into your pie. He'll get a slice of your pie. The kingdom will have a slice of your pie. And the purpose of including Jesus into your pie is to sweeten the pie. You know, he's the pie sweetener. And he's going to help you do life a little better and you know, somehow organize all these competing alliances that you have because they compete with one another, you know, and you're pulled in all these different directions. You're saying, somebody help me with all this. I'm pulled in all these directions. Well, Jesus is there to help you do that. Jesus is there to help with a lot of things. But the main thing to note is that he's there in your pie rather than the other way around. That's life in the flesh. And if you're thinking in terms of the flesh, then salvation is a part of your pie, and that just means you got your fire insurance. And grace is a part of the pie, and that's just sort of your exception clause. When you sin, you get to appeal to grace, and then it's covered, which means that, you know, sinning isn't that big of a deal. If you're living in that self-centered pie, well, then you'll use everything to your advantage, including grace, and so you can call on grace anytime you want when you feel like sinning. And if you're thinking out of the self-centered pie, well, then when you hear the hard stuff about the gospel, giving up everything, it's very clever, and you insert a little clause there. Oh, if I was willing to, or if I had to. But I'll get to keep my pie until I have to. And I'm going to pray that I don't have to. But I'd be willing to if I had to. And even that's not out of your self-interest, because if you didn't say that, well, then you might get in trouble with God, so you say it. Okay, that's diagram number one. That's life in the flesh. That's the normal way of doing life in the fallen world. And religion just sort of sanctifies that and blesses that and adds to it and supplements the sweetness of the pie. There's an entirely different kind of paradigm. And it's the one I believe Jesus is calling the crowd to. In this paradigm, we could call it life under the reign of God. This is the kingdom of God. And in this paradigm, Jesus